there or thereabouts again, but yeah, nothing really to shout about.
And those are big hitters as well, right, Claire? These are big manufacturers languishing at the back. It is, especially from McLaren as well. You know, we've been here before with them. This isn't the first time where, you know, they've been struggling at the back. This is, I think you said right at the start, it's not going to be an overnight fix, is it?
It's a real shame for McLaren. And I think for me, we had to go through the Alonso's and the Stoffel Van Dorn's years. And that was really hard for everyone to see, because McLaren is a team that we all enjoy seeing do well for some reason. There's something about McLaren, their history, everything that they are. We just enjoy seeing them thrive. And I really hoped when, Danny Rick came over, Lando was already, making good progress with the team. And I really hoped when Danny Rick came over that we would see some really, really good performances from him as well. Because you have to say, as Danny Rick has gone along to different places, he went to Red Bull for a bit, and obviously there was maybe the tension of when Verstappen came in and he wasn't being treated as the sort of equal, so then he left there to go to Renault, and then Renault weren't doing that great, then he went to McLaren, and then now McLaren aren't doing so great. So I do feel for Danny. He seems to go from one team to the next team to the next team that are in their process of struggle. So I'm really... I don't know if I'm that confident that we will see a huge step come Saudi Arabia from McLaren, but I could be very wrong. I'm not an engineer. They could hook it all up and it could be amazing, but it's not a good start, and I don't know where they go from here. Hopefully, probably up, because they can't go any further lower, I don't think. But it's a real question mark for me, that one. I don't know is the answer, which isn't the best thing as like a analysis, insight. The answer is I don't know. But the answer is I don't know, because I don't know if they're going to hook it up. But I hope that we see something different, because Lando gets quite miserable, and I can't speak to Lando all year with his miserable sadness. So I'm hoping we see Danny Rick's more smile, like lots of smiles from Danny Rick, and a happier Lando. But we'll see.
Did you both you and Lewis, obviously in the paddock over the weekend, did you get a feeling from McLaren as to, oh, this is a shock, we weren't expecting this, or did you get that feeling, we kind of thought this might be like this? Did you get any feeling from them?
We spoke to, not really. I think they were not feeling confident after testing, I think, okay. but I don't think they felt it was going to be as bad. I personally think Daniel Ricciardo is suffering from obviously not having enough testing. And when I had COVID, I afterwards, 2 weeks or so, really struggled with my breathing. And it didn't even go to my chest. It was a head cold. It was all a head cold. And I was incredibly fatigued, like almost like I'd been out on like a bender all night. And every single night I'd go to bed at like 9. And I'd wake up like I'd been hit by a ton of bricks. And that went on for like a couple of weeks after I was not positive anymore and over COVID. So he says he's absolutely fine. But I don't know if just your body sometimes does these things. And he could have been tired. So there could have been things there as well. So I think all in all, it's been a tough time in general for McLaren, especially with Danny Rick being out for the whole of testing. But I think they expected to not be up there fighting, but I don't know if they expected it to be this bad.
Yeah, I think it was a shock to them as much as it was for us how bad things actually went in the race. Because, as Claire said, there was an expectation that it was going to be difficult. They admitted they were on the back foot after testing. Daniel Ricciardo obviously didn't do the test and had COVID. So yeah, I think there was a feeling that it would be a difficult weekend, but not quite the disaster it actually turned out to be. Lando sort of said that this could take a little while to solve, and he's expecting, he said, pain, which is a bit concerning. Hopefully they can get on top of these issues in the coming races and start moving back up and being more competitive. Whether or not Saudi might come too soon, it probably will for a huge change. But yeah, I think it was a shock to McLaren.
Well, I thought it's interesting to note as well, I think, Ben, that all of the teams languishing at the back were Mercedes power unit teams as well. So having the best power unit to suddenly, well, looking at the results, the worst. Ferrari made huge gains as well. Honda, well, the Red Bull powertrain now, well, one caught on fire, but we don't know the exact cause of that yet. But it certainly seems that Mercedes are down on power in general.
Possibly, yeah. It's, I mean, Toto keeps saying, well, we're not down on power, but everyone else has picked up,
Well, yeah.
Honda or Red Bull, however you want to call it. The official name, of course, now is Red Bull Power Plant, but it is still very much the Honda. And Ferrari, I think they have, and Renault have caught back up effectively to where Mercedes have had the edge. That's what it's looking like. But it is interesting looking at the straight line speeds of the Mercedes powered cars. The one that actually had reasonable straight line speed was the Williams, but then looking at its speed through the slow and medium speed corners, it's clearly running very low downforce. It's a bit like old style Williams. They're running a low downforce, low drag car, so they had reasonable pace in a straight line. But as we saw, they weren't very quick through the corners. The other cars, the Aston, McLaren and Mercedes, Mercedes not bad through the corners, but certainly wasn't shining down the straights, and the McLaren and Aston Martin losing out everywhere. So it's a bit hard to tell at this stage because it is, the power of the engine is engaged so much with the aerodynamics of the car that for us it's very difficult to tell. But I agree that it certainly doesn't look like Mercedes have got any advantage in the power unit. Whether they've actually got a disadvantage is hard to say.
Yeah, well, it does seem like you have to sort of caveat this whole thing by saying it is only the first race and every track's different and you've got all the different things that are going to affect that. But before we move on to having a look at Saudi this weekend, of course, the teams make their way there this weekend. We just skipped over him, but I wanted to bring up our rookie, Zhou Guanyu, Lewis. Didn't look out of his depth over the weekend. Didn't quite match the pace of his more experienced teammate Valtteri Bottas, who we know is quick. I think he was very underrated against Lewis Hamilton. I think you always are going to be, but he kept him honest. So the fact that Zhou Guanyu was able to be thereabouts, get into Q2, get a point at the end as well, looked good for the Chinese racer.
Yeah, it did. Qualifying obviously overshadowed by Valtteri's result, but still a decent result to get into Q2. But yeah, it was. I think he held his own in the race. It was actually a very impressive drive to make his way through. Not making any mistakes, driving smartly, making a couple of overtakes and finding his way into the points. It was, a really sort of impressive start from him. Similar to Yuki last year, of course, as well. Yuki scored a point on his debut and everyone was very excited about that. But no, a really, really solid start for Zhou. And it was really nice to see how emotional he was as well afterwards in the paddock when he came back to the team. You could really tell how much that meant to him, and that was great to see as well. But a really good day overall for the Alfa Romeo team compared to obviously their sort of struggles last season.
And they've got this really nice sort of apprentice-master relationship, haven't they, with Bottas and Zhou, it seems, which is so nice to see. There is so much to talk about, but we're straight into another weekend. So, Ben, give us a quick look into Saudi Arabia and your thoughts there. Obviously, it's made its debut last year. A few tweaks for this season's race in terms of the sight lines and just pushing a few barriers back and things like that. But it certainly provided quite a dramatic race last year. What are you expecting this time around?
Well, yeah, it has potential for drama again, there's no doubt, because although they have made a few changes, the only corner they've really changed is turn 27, which is the last corner. It's actually where Max had a spin when he was on target for getting pole position. He was on an absolutely outstanding lap this time last year. Well, it wasn't this time last year. Let's not forget, it was only 3 months ago, really. So it's very quickly that they've come back to Saudi because it was the penultimate race of last year, and yet it's only the second race of this year. So anyway, Max had that big spin. They have made a change there. They have, as you say, made some other changes. They put up some metal barriers, interestingly, on the concrete walls, so that if you skim the wall, you'll hopefully just sort of polish off it rather than get caught by the concrete. So we'll see if that works. But it is a track. I remember Christian Horner saying about it that it's basically Suzuka between walls because it is super fast, super commitment type track, but it's a street track. And so there are concerns. There are areas where the visibility ahead is not very much. So if there's a car in trouble, And of course, we're still in the early stages of this season. As we saw, reliability did become a factor. Not in the early part of the race. It actually surprised me we didn't lose any cars in the early part of Bahrain. But, if you have a car break down towards that back part, sure enough, you get the yellow flags out. But the visibility is tricky. So it worries me a little bit, this track. I hope it stays clean. But we saw, two red flag restarts last year. It was at a very climactic time to the championship, which had an effect. But the possibilities of damage, the possibilities of things going wrong are pretty high on a track like this.
And just to add to that, some of the drivers have also sort of highlighted concerns about the bigger wheels, the 18-inch tyres this year, and the deflectors over the top of those as well. How that could affect things this weekend too. Might make visibility difficult into certain corners. So that could play a role too in seeing how the drivers adapt to that.
If I could also add something, I watched Saudi from home last year, and for me, I was for the first time watching F1, was quite terrified of what might unfold, and I was incredibly interested to see how it was reported on afterwards, because it felt like nobody took that into account. And I haven't been scared watching a F1 race for a very long time. The safety that we have in motorsport, as we all know, we could do a whole podcast on that, is incredible now, and thankfully we are in a great position. But it was a terrifying race to watch, and I didn't enjoy it because of that. I know they've made the changes this year, and I know lots of things have come in, and they've widened the final corner and all this sort of stuff, but it's essentially still the same track. And we've got different cars, obviously. They're bigger, they're wider, they're heavier, they're slower. But I don't know how I feel about going to it. And I don't know if I'm on my own, because sometimes when I think these things and then I voice them out loud to people in F1, they're like, I don't quite follow. But I truly was quite scared watching it.
No, actually, I understand you totally on that, Claire. I mean, it's a track. It's one of those tracks that does concern me too. Being a street track, with those sort of speeds, they're averaging 155 miles an hour around there on a flying qualifying lap. I do have some anxiety about it. I mean, in theory, everything is set up according to the rules. We know, the cars have incredible safety records, but street tracks are never the safest things, and yeah, there's no doubt. For me, I tend to agree. It's not a track that I have total confidence. Everything will be fine.
I agree as well. I had similar feelings last year, and there were a few scary incidents and near misses across the race weekend, and you just had that feeling that something was going to happen, and you were kind of just sort of waiting for potentially something to go wrong. And thankfully, we obviously got away with it in the end. There were a couple of the crash at the start of the F2 race was concerning. I mean, that wasn't circuit specific; that was the car stalling on the grid. But yeah, there was a bit of an uneasy feeling throughout the weekend last year, and it could be similar this season.
Certainly, I was actually going to bring that up. The Formula 2 start, I think that was Teo Porcher and Enzo Fittipaldi, but as you say, that was more of a car stalling and then being unsighted by the amount of cars in between. But it's certainly in the support categories, there was a lot of incidents going into Turn 1 and Turn 2, so that's something to watch out for as well. So I don't think you're alone in that, Claire, at all. But one thing I'd like to know from all of you that you're looking out for this weekend in particular. There is so much in a Formula 1 race weekend to keep a track of, but one thing you're looking out for. Claire, let's start with you and then we'll do Lewis and Ben.
One thing I'm looking forward to. I'm nervous about going to Saudi Arabia in general as a female. That is something that I'm quite nervous about, travelling on my own. And something that I'm looking forward to for the weekend, and I only mention that because I just think it's quite important as a woman in the paddock just to voice that, because that is how I feel. Something I'm looking forward to. I've heard that the catering is very good, so I'm excited about that. In terms of on track, I am looking forward to watching a race and seeing the full potential of each of those cars, because I think that we had a brilliant start in Bahrain, but obviously with the reliability issues that we had for Red Bull and the but the rubbishness of the McLaren in terms of coming into this weekend, I'm looking forward to like a straight fight where there's no someone hasn't been testing because of COVID and something else has happened and something. I just want to see these cars battle it out and see who is actually going to be the one to watch out for this year. I think that's what I'd like. I'm going to try and think of some more because that's a bit of a dull one, but I'm going to stick with that for now.
Well, hopefully the catering will meet your requirements as well, Claire. We'll have to put in a good word for you. Lewis, what about you?
For me, to see whether Ferrari can keep up their form and whether they really do have this sort of title contender that it seems in Bahrain. Obviously, Saudi's a track that Max was so good around last year, and he would have been on course for pole. So it'd be really interesting to see how the Ferrari and the Red Bull shape up against each other there, and yeah, just to see whether Ferrari can go on a bit of a run and string some results together early on this season. I think that's the thing I'm looking out for this weekend.
Nice. And Ben?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Funnily enough, I think what will interest me a little bit is something we've already been talking about is the McLaren performance. Was that a bit of a one-off? They did okay in testing in Barcelona, although I do remember Fernando Alonso making a comment. He thought that they were maybe running a bit lower on fuel in Barcelona. Did they really have that pace? So we'll see. They had a tough time. Lando Norris did such a fabulous job in Russia last year, street track, different type of street track. But he is one of those drivers we know that can just really nail it if the car's right for him. Is it going to be right for him? It's a different type of track to the Russian one, much faster. So whether that, again, may not suit the McLaren. But I think that's what I'm going to be kind of really looking at. Looking at Aston Martin as well, to a certain extent, to see if they're that far down again. But particularly McLaren, particularly Lando, who has been doing so much testing in that car. Daniel's on a bit of a back foot. Let's see what Norris does.
Just a quick one as well. It'd be nice to see. So when I spoke to Sebastian Vettel just off the back of Bahrain, the testing, he had like this really nice like old school sparkle about him. And I don't know if you remember, like before he went to Ferrari, obviously he had that Red Bull sparkle that he had. And he just felt like he had it back. And I was really excited to see him out on track, even though, we're not really sure what Aston's going to be, solid midfield, I would assume. Hulkenberg not really a true representation, I don't think, for this weekend. But I was just really excited to see if we could work on that sparkle and see more of that Sebastian Vettel that we saw at Red Bull and move away from the tough time he had at Ferrari. So I'm also quite excited to see Sebastian back out as well.
Let's hope he is back out.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the current time of recording, no news on that as of yet. I know Hulkenberg is in the back of the factory learning Saudi Arabia just in case, but still no news as of yet about whether Sebastian Vettel will be returning. But we'll keep you updated, of course, on crash.net for all of that. Okay, now to the incredibly difficult part of every podcast. And this is only the second one already, but it will be on the every single one. Predictions, please, for this weekend. Now, if we have a look back to last weekend, I believe we get a point for every driver on the podium that we get right, and we all at least got 2, so we all got 2 points last time around, but no one got the winner. We all thought Verstappen was going to be winner, but not the case, clearly. Now, Claire, because you're a special guest, we're going to have a special guest leaderboard as well, because obviously you won't be with us every week, but we will have a special guest leaderboard, so at the end of the year we can see who is the best of the guests. But who wants to go first then? Who's feeling brave? Who wants to have a prediction of your top 3 for Saudi Arabia? Raise your hands.
I'll dive in because I've got no idea, really. I think, I do see a prospect of another Verstappen-Leclerc battle, because Leclerc qualified really well there last year. Even though he'd had a shunt on the Friday, he ended up qualifying 4th, dropped out a bit in a couple of places in the race. But he's another good street track man. He got pole in Monaco last year. The thing is, will they both get through the race? But I am going to go for Leclerc, actually, for a double victory. I'm going to say Max second. And I think, I'll probably be a bit boring and go for Sainz third.
Okay. Leclerc, Verstappen and Sainz from Ben. Go on, Lewis.
Right.
Claire's
go.
Yeah.
With no, again, exactly the same as, but I'm famously not very good at predictions, it has to be said. This is why I don't do like fantasy football teams or anything like that. I'm just awful. So I will go Verstappen for the win.
Okay.
Charles Leclerc, I think, will be second. And I think Sergio Perez will be third.
Ooh.
I sounded a bit like I was doing Cluedo then, didn't I? I was like, in the library with the hammer. There's no hammer in there. Is there a hammer in Cluedo? I'm not sure, actually. The rope, whatever. Carry on. Lewis, your go.
The lead pipe, isn't it? That's it. Go on, Lewis. Your top three then, please.
I'm going to say Max for the win this week, just based on his qualifying lap last year. I think if he can pull that out of the bag this year, yeah, I'm going to say Max for first place, Leclerc in second, and I think Sainz in third, just because the Ferrari looks so good, and it's hard to see Mercedes getting on the podium on pure pace based on last weekend. So yeah, that's my prediction.
Yeah, I think those are all fairly reasonable predictions. I'm backing Carlos Sainz for his first ever win. I think he came from the back last year to a pretty decent point scoring position.
15th,
so
I think he was, yeah.
Yeah, so he goes well around Saudi. I know there's only one race to go off the back of, but I've got this feeling about Carlos Sainz this year. I don't know. I think he could be really in for the hunt. And then I'm going Leclerc second and Verstappen to round out the podium. So we shall see if that pays off.
So we've all assumed they're not going to have a shunt. That's good, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, not long to wait until we find out what the actual outcome will be when we head to Saudi Arabia. But I think that just about brings us to the end of this Crash F1 podcast. Looking ahead to Saudi Arabia, it's been a cracker of a start of the season so far. Fingers crossed we get even more brilliant action awaiting us in just a few days. So Ben Edwards, thank you very much as ever, and Lewis Larkam too, and our special guest, racefans.net F1 journalist Claire Cottingham, for joining us from Bahrain, battling through the room service and the Wi-Fi. Always a pleasure. So thank you very much. Do make sure you keep up to date with all the very latest F1 news on crash.net, and make sure you subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, rate and review and all that jazz. It really helps with all those various algorithms and things like that. Thank you for your company, and in the meantime, as I say, keep up with all the latest on crash.net. If you fancy MotoGP as well, if that's your thing, we do a MotoGP podcast with former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Hewen. Make sure you check that out wherever you get your podcasts as well. And in the meantime, myself, Ben and Lewis will see you back here next week. Bye-bye.